in Southern California. This is Radio Free Los Angeles. Do you copy? Repeat, do you copy?
Now transmitting from behind the Iron Curtain in the People's Republic of California, we bring you the voice of free men, free markets, and limited constitutional government. Welcome to citizen-sponsored Radio Free Los Angeles with President of the California Taxpayers Union, Mike Alexander, and editor of the Taxpayer Gazette, Jonathan Wilson.
All right, back with you here, Mike Alexander, Jonathan Wilson, coming to you, Radio Free Los Angeles here, a radio station AM 870, The Answer, right here in the belly of the beast, Los Angeles County. If you'd like to be part of the program, especially during the first half hour and the third half hour, please call us at 866-870-5752.
I like your tie tonight, Mike.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, where'd you get that?
My wife gave it to me the same, which usually stimulates a response. You have a wife? Somebody to stick with you? Yeah, modern miracles.
You were at a Christmas party earlier, right?
Yes, I was. Yeah, for St. Monica Academy of Montrose now. But Patricia and I were very much involved in the founding of the school, and we continue to support it. We're avid supporters of private education of all kinds, and so we were there at a little fundraiser for them tonight. So, so I'm dressed appropriately for the occasion.
Yeah. By the way, we want to tell our listeners you could watch us live on Facebook if you search for Radio Free Los Angeles, or you can go to radiofreela.us, and that'll link you up to our Facebook page.
Excellent. And we need to be in touch with more of you. This coming year is going to be an incredible year, and I'm going to start talking to you about some of these issues right now. But we need to communicate with you. And if you want to be part of what we're doing, where do they go, Jonathan? How do they sign up?
It's very easy. CaliforniaTaxpayersUnion.org, and there's a Join the Union button. So you can join or contribute. Any contribution really helps. We've got a lot of work to do.
Remember, this is citizen-sponsored radio, and it is growing very quickly, and we're getting the message out there. I know there's a lot of discouragement after the most recent elections here in California, but you should not be discouraged. Believe me, they count on it. And some of you may reply, well, you can't change those votes. That's objective reality. Why should we not be discouraged about that? Well, we should not be discouraged because, remember, we are Americans, and these things can change. Tonight I was talking with a good friend of mine that I've known for many, many, many years, and he was lamenting the state of things here in California. And I asked him this question. I put this question to all of you out there. Who do you think is historically more tolerant of taxation? The French or the Americans? What would you say, Jonathan?
I would say the French.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So now you look what we've got. The frogs over there jacked up taxes so high. This sounds like a joke. How bad were the taxes? The taxes were so bad that the Frenchmen are rebelling against high taxes, right? So anybody who thinks that the limit of taxation cannot be met, that there isn't some fundamental political limitation to overtaxation, well, you're seeing it right in Paris. Now, who was predicting that this was going to happen? Did you hear anybody warn of future civil unrest over taxes in France, of all places? Do you hear anything about that?
Nope.
No, sir, you didn't. And even now, it's only a few places that these tax riots, and that's what they are, that these tax riots are even being reported in the mainstream media here in the United States. We know about them because we go to alternate sites like WorldNet Daily or the Drudge Report. Drudge Report is actually pretty mainstream. They report a wide variety of news.
I didn't even realize that. So the mainstream media is not reporting on that?
No.
Wow.
See, there's so many things that we are aware of that other people are not. And this is one thing that I've emphasized for a long time, and I think that there are other hosts out there that do this who comment on the same phenomenon, and that is we don't always know what it is that people know. And you and I know things. This audience here knows so many things about the current historical scene. You also, the contemporary scene, and you also have a strong historical sense. Well, there's so many people that don't. Start off with how many million people that flat out come from another country. And how about the people who are indoctrinated in our public schools? And the people who get most of the news off of their phone with that Yahoo garbage that Apple sends out over their default news application. You've seen that. Yeah. It's all left-wing. Or you go on Apple TV or whatever. They've got a little bit more variety, but the mainstream news services, MSNBC, CNN, all that sort of thing, they are constantly streaming a torrent of misinformation and omitted information. So we're aware of these riots. But my point to you out there, conservatives, is this. Never lose heart. The limits of the welfare state can be reached. They can be met. When you look at what's happening to people in France, their vaunted quality of life, even with the American subsidy of their defense, which Trump has been complaining about, all of this is doing nothing but propping up the welfare state. And in France, the welfare state is starting to collapse, even with massive subsidies for years and years and years. Or economists would say, wrong, Mike, not despite, but because of the subsidies for everything from soup to nuts in the European socialist systems. And now, graft onto that, massive immigration, legal and otherwise, from the Middle East, the tremendous influx of Muslim populations into Europe, and you have a recipe for disaster, and that's what's going on over there. I mean, when was the last time they stormed the Champs-Élysées? Huh? Or the presidential palace? Can anybody say 1793 in the French Revolution?
Yeah, I guess it got bad there in 68. I'm not sure. Yeah, so they had some. But, those workers over there are always striking.
Yeah.
I mean, they're always complaining about something.
Right.
Maybe not taxes.
Yeah, well, this time it's with the taxes. We know this because Macron, or how did the frog say it? Macron? I can't.
Macron. You got to do a little nasal.
A little nasal.
Macron.
I know it's.
I took some French in college.
Yeah, I actually am a great admirer of French culture in the French language. But the old joke about the French rifle for sale, dropped once, never fired. Yes. In any event, back to these riots. Let's talk about taxes and whatnot. There's always the feeling that these things can never be overcome. And the same friend that I was speaking with tonight, who's also an avid amateur historian, in fact, teaches a little history in high school now during his retirement, particularly on the American Revolution. It always happens that great events in history take us by surprise. And leading up to these great events, there's no one who's predicting them, but the same people who failed to predict them and assured that these events could never happen, after they do happen, look back and now say those events were inevitable. And we have one such situation here in the United States. This is still America, and people still value their freedoms. Let's talk about what's going on in our own state of California and throughout our entire governmental apparatus. The government, the great Leviathan state, is growing like topsy, and nowhere is it more evident than in the state of California with the pensions. And you know, Jonathan, when you talk about who knows what or how they come to know what, this brings to mind another conversation that I had this past week with a fellow about the situation. I mean, I've gotten a flood of calls since the election. Everybody wants to know, where do we go from here? And I point out the nature of our overall problem. It is one of gerrymandering or gerrymandering, which has three manifestations. The first manifestation of, I'll use the traditional pronunciation, gerrymandering, is typically the practice of a political party of redrawing district lines until they find the constituents they like. And the redistricting process is frequently a process in which representatives select their constituents rather than the constituents selecting them. So here in California, we have long since become accustomed to elongated, odd-shaped Rorschach-type districts which heavily favor one party over the other. These days, it's Democrat over Republican. From time to time, it's been the other way around. But this is how politicians choose their constituents rather than their constituents choosing them. In the modern day, gerrymandering has another manifestation, and that is illegal, unrestricted immigration. That is, in that type of gerrymandering, politicians once again choose people.
They import their voters.
They import their voters,
yeah.
Right. So they run out of lines that they can redraw, so now they simply import people who agree with them, people who will be pliable, who will be formable, who can be induced by welfare or by other appeals to join their party. So that's the second example of gerrymandering. The third example of gerrymandering, and the most evil and the most pernicious and the most effective, is the public so-called school, so-called system. Using public education, they indoctrinate, brainwash, form, persuade, direct the next generation of citizens to think like the politicians do. In other words, to become their kind of constituent if they are not already. And that's why it is essential, if we are going to take our country back, we must first take back our children and take back the money that is used to school and indoctrinate these children. And that's why our overriding priority is not voter ID. It is not countering vote harvesting or any of that other sort of thing. Those are secondary. They're important, but they are secondary to our ultimate mission, and that is school choice. We must return control over children's education and control over those important resources to the parents, no matter where the parents came from. And I believe that if we do that, we have a shot at taking our country back. If we don't do that, we surely have no hope at all. I would point out to all of you that it was only 30 years ago that Ronald Reagan was still the president of the United States. And by and large, so many of the things that were accomplished during the Reagan administration have now disappeared and come to naught. It's hard to know. Going into 2016, it was hard to realize that Ronald Reagan had once been the president of the United States. Mm-hmm. Even George Bush, who was H.W. Bush, God rest his soul, who was a decent sort of fellow, but even he was more liberal than Ronald Reagan and supported a lot of things that Ronald Reagan did not. Now we have the Trump administration. We have some chance of turning these things around, and it has enraged the left. It has enraged the establishment, and as has been pointed out by many, many others than I, the people that they're upset with is not Donald Trump. They're upset with you and me. They're upset with us because we dare to assert our ownership of our country. We dare to demand a smaller government. We dare to demand our freedom. And what could be more controversial? It's remarkable that in America this should be this way, but what could possibly be more controversial than our demand that they return our children and return the money that they purport to spend on our children so that we can choose how to educate our children or grandchildren, as may be the case. They will fight this with everything that they have. I promise you, they will spend hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to oppose Californians wanting to educate their own children. In fact, I predict that George Soros will come out here and personally walk precincts to predict the fall of America, when in fact public so-called school, so-called education is the mortal enemy of our freedoms as parents and as citizens. It's the mortal enemy of the United States. And when we talk about immigration, whether it's legal or illegal, we bring new people into our country literally by the millions. 63% of them are on some form of welfare. That's not the American way. Independence, self-reliance, personal freedom, responsibility for running our government. What, we're going to bring people in, give 63% of them money, and then expect them to assert their independence when they go into the to the polling places? No, the politicians who have permitted this, including many on both sides of the aisle, these people know this and have refused to stop it. But you and I, we say, all right, some people are here. Maybe we can't send them all back, but what is our plan for making them Americans? Well, the plan to make them Americans is what? It's to turn them over to the equivalent of the Communist Party. That would be the California State Teachers Association. These people hate us. These people are there to foster the growth of government. They're there to feather their own nest. They're there to secure their futures and their permanent employment, their lifetime pensions, not yours, not mine, not ours. And at the same time, we bring all these people, mostly in from Mexico, and we're going to try to teach them how to be American, as we must. We've got to have some way to try to communicate with these people and to give them the tools that they're going to need to participate in the economy of the future and to fully participate and work with us to build and operate our democracy, our republic, to save it. But if we're not teaching them about it, if we're not even teaching our own native sons and daughters about this process, what hope can we possibly have of saving the future? So you see that when our adversaries look at our situation here, when they look at Donald Trump, if Mueller doesn't get rid of them, even if they have to put up with Trump for another 6 years, what is the source of their comfort? Well, the answer is they can always fall back on the public so-called school, so-called system to do the indoctrination. They can always fall back on so-called higher education, which is subsidized at incredible levels. They can rely upon that to secure their future, and they can know that sooner or later they will control enough offices, and that's always going to happen right here at the local level. So that's why this program, the California Taxpayers Association, and other groups will be working in the coming year to put on the ballot a school choice initiative for the 2020 November ballot. It'll go on the ballot at the same time that maybe they're trying to resurrect the witch and get her elected again, or Pocahontas, or whoever the hell, or maybe, who's this, Kamala Harris? What's her name?
Yeah, Kamala Harris.
Man, she's dumb.
Wow,
Yeah.
she is really hard to watch and listen to.
Oh yeah, it's amazing. She can't even read what's written for her. And imagine, she was the Attorney General for the state of California, sixth
Didn't
largest.
she used to date Willie Brown?
She did. Yeah, she was.
So that's how she got up in the political world.
That's right. She studied politics under Willie Brown. Absolutely. And,
This is a family show.
hey, all right. So, hey, by the way, anybody? I'm conducting my own poll. We got 4 minutes to go before the.
Hey, let's give out the phone number.
Yeah. Hey, do it.
866-870-5752. Give us a call and join the conversation.
Yeah, we'd love to hear you. This is from now on not only the program here for free men, free markets, and limited constitutional government. From here on out, we are going to be the voice of choice.
That's right. And you haven't mentioned yet the National School Choice Week coming up in January, right?
I haven't. Why don't you do that?
Well, it's going to be the kickoff of our campaign for 2020 for the School Choice Initiative. It's January 20th through the 26th.
Right.
We're going to have a school choice special evening on Sunday, January 20th.
Yes.
And then on January 26th, we're going to have a school choice summit.
That's correct.
Location and time to be determined. That's a Saturday.
That's right.
But mark your calendars.
Please do. It'll probably be about 9 o'clock in the morning check-in with a 10 a.m. program going to about the early afternoon on Saturday, January 26th. And we will be inviting anyone and everyone who is interested in working on this project. In the meanwhile, we will be reaching out and contacting people at public and private and parochial schools throughout the Los Angeles, Ventura County area. But, of course, the signal goes wide beyond that. You can come no matter where you are.
Yeah, real quick, Mike, because folks might be just joining
Yes.
us and don't know the broad sketch of what this initiative will do.
Yeah, thanks. How much time we have in there, Maestro? Oh, I got 3 minutes. I can do it in 30. All right.
This is your elevator speech, right?
This is my elevator. Hit the button. We're headed to the ground floor or the top floor here. The proposal that we have been studying and have preliminarily decided to support is an Educational Savings Act. Under the Educational Savings Act, a savings account would be established for each K through 12 school child. Into that account would be deposited the average per pupil budget expenditure in the state of California, which is currently, believe it or not, $16,085 for the 18-19 school year. And that $16,000 can be spent by the parents at a school of their choice, whether it's the public school, a charter school, a private school, or an accredited parochial school. Any money they don't spend on K through 12 education can be accumulated and used for college.
So instead of the taxpayer money going to the public schools, it's attached to the student, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
And the parents make the decision now, no, you can't take that money and buy a Corvette with it or anything else. The money's only for accredited schools and qualified educational expenses.
But what if they don't use the $16,000 a year?
They keep it.
Yeah.
Well,
so
if
it
they don't
stays in
use
their
it,
account?
That's right. That's why we call it an ESA, an Educational Savings Account.
Okay.
And that amount of money can then be accumulated. We're studying some of it to where you can use these expenses, for example, for music education that might not be available at the school that you attend. These would all be accredited or approved expenditures. This will go through. This will drive them nuts.
And it's what's really interesting is I'm not sure if we discussed this last week, but school choice made the difference in the Florida governor's race.
It did.
Yeah.
And, we're going to continue this discussion, which is near and dear to my heart. Yes, I have one. And we'll continue it at probably after 9 o'clock. Upcoming in the second half hour, we're going to have Mr. Ken Churchill from Sonoma County, who will talk about the lawsuits that he's been involved in and the scandalous condition of pensions and public employment and public salaries in the county of Sonoma. No news here, but he does have a few things to tell us about illegalities out there. So once again, Mike Alexander, Jonathan Wilson, back with you after the break.
Come in, Southern California. This is Radio Free Los Angeles. Do you copy? Repeat, do you copy?
Now transmitting from behind the Iron Curtain in the People's Republic of California, we bring you the voice of free men, free markets, and limited constitutional government. Welcome to citizen-sponsored Radio Free Los Angeles with President of the California Taxpayers Union, Mike Alexander, and editor of the Taxpayer Gazette, Jonathan Wilson.
All right, back with you, Mike Alexander, Jonathan Wilson, Radio Free Los Angeles, coming to you from the Glendale studios of KRLA, AM 870, The Answer. And we, in here just a few minutes, we'll get on with our guest, Ken Churchill. Later on this evening, I'm going to discuss some of the oral arguments that were had before the California Supreme Court here this past Wednesday. Very hotly argued pension case dealing with the ability of cities and the state of California, other members of the CalPERS organization, to modify pension benefits after a public employee has been hired. So it's very controversial. We now have on as our guest here, Ken Churchill from Sonoma. How are you, Ken? Are you there?
I'm here.
All right, very good. We're very fortunate to have Ken. Ken writes for the California Policy Center. And in fact, if you want to read some of these articles or subscribe to their very excellent newsletter, you can go to californiapolicycenter.org. Again, californiapolicycenter.org. I don't think there's anybody in the state of California that produces better policy discussions or articles. I read it whenever it comes out. And it was in the course of reading that article that I came across Ken Churchill's essay there, talking about how California state or entities could reform their pensions. But as I looked at it, it was dealing with Sonoma County, has some very interesting features of the Sonoma experience, and I found out that Ken and others have been involved in litigation. So I talked about this a little bit last Sunday, but I was fortunate to reach Ken. I thought we'd have him on so he could tell us about the experience in Sonoma County. So Ken, tell us first of all a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your website.
Okay, great to be here. I'm an entrepreneur. I started 2 companies. And my first one was a solar energy contracting firm, and my second one was an environmental consulting firm, which grew to about 30 people. And I sold that company, and my wife retired up here to the Sonoma County wine area.
Beautiful country.
It is. And we planted a vineyard and started producing our own wine, and I'm just actually retiring from that business. So mainly, I started companies and was generally their CEO and CFO. So I learned how to read financial statements, and I understood what, when I started looking at government financial statements, I could kind of understand what I was seeing, and kind of it all snowballed from there.
Yes. Now, when you looked, one of the things that you looked at, which is the same thing as so many of us have been looking at, has been the the pension and retirement crisis that we have in California, and you looked at Sonoma County, and what were your findings about the level of funding and salary levels and that sort of thing about Sonoma County?
Yeah, well, what kind of started me on this path was in 2011, I was reading the newspaper, and there was a story about our roads, and we have the worst roads in the state. And then I read a story saying that the county had decided to suspend pavement preservation on all but 16% of our roads and just fill potholes. And so, being that I live in the county and thought it'd be nice to have a road to drive on, I started researching why anybody would possibly want to abandon their roads. And it soon led me to pensions, and I could see that what had happened, and this happened all over California, was that the county had retroactively, back to the date people were hired, basically increased their pension from something about like 2% per year of service. So if you worked for 30 years, you get 60% of your salary, to 3% per year of service, meaning if you work 30 years, you get 90% of your salary.
Yeah, it was in effect a 50% increase in their pension benefits with no accompanying revenue.
Correct.
Right.
And that really is, and kind of it all started with something called Senate Bill 400, which was when the state retroactively increased pensions for safety people. And then CalPERS went around to all the different cities and encouraged them. They came up with these new formulas. They came out to the cities and said, we have these great new formulas. They're not going to cost you hardly anything, and just go ahead and implement them, and everything will be great. And basically, the politicians who went ahead and voted in these retroactive increases didn't at all, I found out, they didn't understand the cost of what they were voting on. They believed what CalPERS was telling them, and the unions were telling them, and they seemed happy to do it. What I learned through my research was that there's these laws. There's a law called Senate Bill 7507, and it was enacted actually back in 1977 by Governor Jerry Brown, his first time around. Mm-hmm. And basically what the bill did, it was written by a senator named Newton Russell. I think his nickname was the Conscience of the Senate. He was asked by the California Taxpayers Association and the Senate committees on public employment and retirement to do something about what he saw as a problem, which was that communities were and cities were retroactively, or just at that time it wasn't even legal to retroactively increase pensions, but increasing pensions without basically in-running the citizens, and these just backroom deals where pensions were being increased and nobody knew about it. And so he said in his letter to Brown, I have witnessed far too many instances of end-running local government by employee groups seeking the legislation to grant permissive legislation, with the final result being that local government approves employee retirement benefit increases without the taxpayers ever knowing the real cost. Mm-hmm. So he basically wrote 7507, and what it says is, before you increase pensions, you must hire an actuary to determine the future annual cost impact of that increase before you enact it.
Right.
And what I found is in Sonoma County they didn't do that. And then I found out in Marin County they didn't do it. And then I found out in Mendocino County they didn't do it.
Right.
And then I found with the California Policy Center, we started asking for documents from about a dozen cities, and we could find none of them that ever did it.
Right. So and that's what was news to me. That's what I found so intriguing about your research and your article. Go ahead.
So, you've got, every large city's got a city attorney on staff, and county's got county councils, and all these people, their job is to know the rules and the law. So how is it that they were able to they ended up passing all these increases without ever following the law that's the only taxpayer protection for just raising pensions. So the theory of that Senator Russell's was, if you tell people what something's going to cost, they can have a chance to go and say why this is not maybe a good idea as a way to spend their tax dollars. And more importantly, I think, is that the city council members and the boards of supervisors need to know what something's cost before they vote on it.
Right.
And so they were basically all in the dark. They were just believing what the CalPERS people were telling them, and passing these increases, believing that they weren't going to cost anything.
Right.
As we know now, they're costing hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. And in Sonoma County's case, I figure the additional cost over time of these increases is about $1.2 billion of our tax money.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And, when we see this repeatedly, and anybody who listens to this program is well educated on a number of cities and counties. We talk about it all the time. In fact, the situation is so bad that we went on the air here a little over about a year ago, starting to talk about these issues, and we point out the fact that right now the collective pension plans in the state of California, that is for public employees, collectively are probably $1.5 trillion underwater. Nobody really knows that number because nobody really knows what the future is going to be. Depends upon what rate of discount you apply. But back to Sonoma County and you guys, you were a lot more than curious. You took the next step. You decided to take legal action to get these answers. Tell me about that saga, how it got started, who your lawyer was, and what happened.
Okay, so when I first discovered back in about 2011 that the county had not followed the law, I went to a couple of the board of supervisors, and I said, here is... they were all kind of saying that this should have never happened. They didn't have the money. They had $500 million worth of bonds for pensions they had to sell.
Yes. And
they were way underwater. And so I said, hey, here's an opportunity. They didn't do this right. You can undo this increase and, get us back on track, because the old pension formulas actually, in my opinion, were pretty affordable if you fund them right. And it turned out I was being very naive to think that they would do anything.
Yeah.
And so when they didn't, I went to I filed a complaint with our civil grand jury.
Yes.
Which, if somebody's interested in doing questioning, it's one way to find out what really happened. Is you can go to the grand jury and ask them to investigate. And the grand jury basically went to the county and said, "Show us the proof that show us the document, show us the actuarial study that you did this."
Right.
And the county basically couldn't show them anything because they hadn't done anything.
Right. So just to go back for the benefit of our audience, because this is something that requests we need to make either through the civil grand jury, which in Los Angeles has too much work to do, or we can use public records requests for the city. So what you discovered is something I should have known. I didn't know. That's why I'm so grateful to you and the California Policy Center for discovering it. But Senate Bill 7507 or Government Code 7507, whatever it is, says that before a government entity can change, i.e. increase the pension benefits, it has to hire an actuary, and it has a duty to independently determine the cost of a future pension increase. Now, you identified that. You went to the jury, to the Sonoma County grand jury. They asked the county. They came up empty-handed. So what happened next?
So when I saw the report, I went in front of the Board of Supervisors and I said, you've got to hire an independent I guess I call him a Mueller kind of a person that is above reproach, that is going to look into this and figure out what the remedy should be. That's
And
basically what the grand jury said.
And when the laughter died down, what did they say?
They just kind of looked at me. They don't usually talk to you. They let you talk for 3 minutes and then you sit down, and that's about the end of it.
Right.
But what they ended up doing, which is exactly what I didn't want done, was they handed the response over to the county counsel's office, which is basically 56 attorneys who are all going to get this retroactive pension increase.
Right, disinterested parties.
Of interest should have recused themselves.
Right, exactly. Right.
So then I was later contacted by the Marin County grand jury. I told them to look into this 7507 issue. They wrote a scathing report. They found 184 violations of the government code for not notifying.
Jeez.
And then I got a call or an email from a guy named John Moore, who's a retired attorney, lives in Pacific Grove, and he had the same thing happen in his city, where the city council wasn't given the information, the cost information, and our county counsel's office came back and actually said, it really doesn't matter that they didn't do 7507, because 7507, it says you shall do these things, and that our county council, believe it or not, was saying shall doesn't mean it's mandatory. It can be considered directory.
They were classmates of Bill Clinton quarreling over the meaning of is.
Yes. So anyway, it just turns out that the government code has an Article 14 that says shall is mandatory, may is permissive.
Right.
And even our own county has an ordinance that has this exact same definition. So them coming back and telling our supervisors that this didn't matter, it wasn't mandatory, it was a complete, full-blown lie, but our supervisors were happy to believe the lie because it means they didn't have to do anything. And by the way, they got the same pension increase as the other people, because city council members aren't part of the pension system. For some reason, the counties allow supervisors to be, which is another huge mistake.
Okay, we're at 8:50. So you got a hold of John Moore. He had the same problem that you did. You got total malarkey out of the county counsel's office. You guys then sued. Is that correct?
Yeah. So then when I got John's analysis, I went to a friend of mine who's a retired attorney and said, George, his name's George Luke. I said, do you know any civically minded attorneys? And he said, why? And I said, well, let's go have lunch. And I showed George my research, and he was furious about it. And he filed he's retired, but he filed a lawsuit as a citizen against the county, the Retirement Association. And basically what they did was the attorney they hired basically said, everything George says is true. Mm-hmm. We didn't follow the law. We didn't do any of that. But he should have brought his lawsuit 3 years after this was enacted, which would have been 2006.
Yeah, claimed it was barred by the statute of limitations.
Right, which if you know anything about the statute of limitations, one thing is it's 3 years after discovery. So our discovery of this illegal act and the fact that 7507 was mandatory wasn't until 2016, and he filed a lawsuit in 2017.
Right.
And there's another issue, is something called continual accrual, which means, and there's been court cases where you can't keep doing something illegal over and over again, and that every time they send out a check to somebody for an illegal amount,
it restarts the statute. I agree.
Starts all over again.
Yeah, the first one I don't agree with. I think the county council is probably right on the three. The three. But when you're looking at important matters of public policy, that decision may have been void from the very beginning, regardless of whether anybody asked for it or not. The legal expression goes void ab initio, void from, to translate Latin.
Void from inception.
Void from the get-go.
Yeah, so that was the other argument, too. And actually what we found was that, there's another section of the law that says the Board of Supervisors are the ones that have to have a board resolution
Yes.
and enact by a board vote these new pension formulas. And one of the things we learned really late in the game, because they didn't give us the documents right away, was just about 2 or 3 years ago that what happened was the unions were suing the Retirement Association to try to get more of their pay items considered pensionable. And as part of the settlement, the Retirement Association basically gave the unions these new formulas. And so it wasn't even the Board of Supervisors that enacted the new formulas. It was part of the backdoor settlement of a lawsuit.
Yes.
So there's not even a board resolution in Sonoma County adopting these increases.
Yes.
There's nothing. They've done nothing. So there's no legality to it.
Okay, Ken, and by the way, you and I had a delightful and far-ranging conversation earlier this week. Unfortunately, I find myself compressed into radio issues here, and you're going to hear more from Ken in the future. We're going to put his stuff up online. So you went to the county, made that argument, and apparently the trial court in Sonoma County, the same guys who are also benefiting from those pension increases, the judge there ruled in favor of the county. Is that correct?
Yeah, and we expected that.
Yes.
And so what followed from that is that I had, because of my writing and close work with the California Policy Center and their founder and chairman, Bob Lowen,
yes,
who's also an attorney.
I know Bob.
He started looking at this, and he said, and we decided to team up, and we hired a law firm to handle George's appeal to appellate court, and so now we think we have a much better chance with an appellate court. It'll be 5 judges will decide the case.
Who's the law firm representing you on appeal?
What's that?
Who's the law firm representing you on appeal?
Robinson and Robinson out of Irvine.
Yeah, I know who they are. Yeah, good guys.
Yeah,
great.
So we just are in the process of filing that. The timeline we think is maybe September of next year. We may have a ruling.
All right. Now, I've got 1 minute to go, Ken Churchill. You have a website that sets forth all this and a heck of a lot more. You sent me some of it earlier this week. What is that website?
We started an organization called New Sonoma. It stands for the New Sonoma is the county we want, honest, serves the taxpayers, gives us the services we deserve for our tax dollars.
Revolutionary. NewSonoma.org, is that correct?
NewSonoma.org is the website.
Right.
You can also Google my name, Ken Churchill, and you'll go to all the articles I've written for the California Policy Center. It's the first thing that comes up.
Yes. You're doing God's work up there, amazing work, and we look forward to staying in touch with you on the progress of that suit. And, in fact, maybe one of these times as these issues are framed more coherently or in the briefing process, we can maybe have you back on with one of the members of the Robinson & Robinson firm to let us know what these issues are, because these have broad appeal, broad application to every city and every county in the state of California. Sonoma is the same as L.A., the same as San Diego, Riverside, or the city of La Cañada, or the city of Yermo. Everybody has this, the same problem. The whole thing is nothing but a fraud, a hustle, and a con, a continuing criminal enterprise. My characterization, Ken, not yours. I know you got to live in that county, but
no, I'm right with you.
I'm happy to carry the battle to them. So, at any rate, we've been privileged to have Ken Churchill from NewSonoma.org on with us tonight. Many thanks, Ken, and we will be back with you after the break. Mike Alexander, Jonathan Wilson, Radio Free Los Angeles, back with you in just a minute.
in, Southern California. This is Radio Free Los Angeles. Do you copy? Repeat, do you copy?
Now transmitting from behind the Iron Curtain in the People's Republic of California, we bring you the voice of free men, free markets, and limited constitutional government. Welcome to citizen-sponsored Radio Free Los Angeles with President of the California Taxpayers Union, Mike Alexander, and editor of the Taxpayer Gazette, Jonathan Wilson.
Okay, Mike Alexander, Jonathan Wilson, Radio Free Los Angeles, coming to you from AM 870 KRLA in Los Angeles. The phones are lighting up here, and I'd love for you to be part of our program. Please call our number at...
Yeah, give us a call, 866-870-5752. By the way, a big shout-out to Charlie K., who's listening in Ohio.
Wow.
Yeah, isn't that cool? It's spreading.
It is.
We got a contribution from someone in Lansing, Michigan this week.
You're kidding.
No. I have no idea how he... We're going to call him and find out how he found out about us.
Well, welcome. And speaking of which... the way to support this program. And by the way, these issues that we're talking about are not local issues. They're not even statewide issues. These things that we're talking about and the manner in which we're discussing them apply to every city and every county across the United States. And as much as I love the Drudge Report, as much as I love Rush and Mark and Levin, Hannity, and all these guys, they're only dealing with half of the problem. And the other half of the problem is state and local. And you know, where do you think that the problem was with the voting down in Florida? That wasn't a federal problem. It was a local problem with somebody who'd been elected down there. We're not paying near enough attention to the mischief that's going on out here. But go to RadioFreeLosAngeles.net or to the California Taxpayers Union, all spelled out, .org, or is it .com?
It's .org.
.org.
California Taxpayers Union.org.
Go to either of those places.
It's very important that if the listeners support our work, because I think we're one of the last firewalls for California.
Oh, we are. We're going over on offense. I don't want anything to do with defense. We're going over on offense here on school choice. We're going to take back our kids. We're going to take back our money, which, by the way, is half of the California state budget.
Yeah. There's probably not a better organization. There's a handful of organizations in California that are fighting for taxpayers, but if you contribute to our organization, it's contribution well made.
And we're on the air every week, and nobody's paying us. We're not cashing checks over here, ladies and gentlemen. We're writing them. Hey, we're into the call phase here, and I want to lead off with our good friend of the show here, Brent in Los Angeles. Brent, how are you this evening? Thanks for joining us.
Yes, hello, Mike. Hello, John.
Hey, Brent.
Thanks for helping to lift my spirits. I've been so down since the elections.
Oh, yeah, no, we're on offense here. Just saddle up, get going.
Yes, and it was wonderful to hear Ken Churchill talking about this pension plunder, that we just have to see these pensions, these state pensions, as just outright plunder.
Right. Now, I know what you called in to talk about tonight, and I want to use that point to underscore Ken's. Go ahead.
Okay.
You want to talk about something else tonight.
Yes, I wanted to call in about something that everybody's been snickering and laughing at it, but it's the California capriciously banning of plastic straws. It's the banning of normalcy. And if a state can just capriciously ban something that is so normal, they can ban anything. And this is an extremely dangerous precedent as far as I can see. I wanted your thoughts on that.
Well, you're exactly right. These people intend to control us in every way that they possibly can. And when you listen to what Ken was talking about, and you look at what's going on with Mueller back there, it's all the same thing. The law doesn't apply to certain people, but it applies with draconian efficiency to you and to me. So when it comes to their money, we don't really have to follow that law. Shall means may. In fact, it just means whatever the hell we want it to mean. In the meanwhile, we told you to put that plastic straw down, and if you don't, we're going to come down there and fine you. If you don't pay the fine, we'll take your car, we'll take your restaurant, we will shut you down.
Yeah.
And it's a power message. And in the meanwhile, while they're talking to us about this baloney and any arguments for plastic straws, or Jonathan was going to chime in here about.
Oh, I was just going to say, it's funny that Brent brings this up because this got underneath my craw this morning. I was at the golf course down at the Rose Bowl, Brookside, and ordered an iced tea. And she said, "Would you like a straw?" And it was one of those little paper straws. And I was like, "No, thanks." And she laughed too. She's like, "I know, these are ridiculous."
Right,
So-
that's what they are. But they've come into our lives. They tell us how much water can flow through our toilet. They tell us how much current can flow through the wires to our house. And now they're coming down and monitoring our Cokes and our beverages and our drinks. And this is just to remind you that they control you, they control your money, they control your property, and all this business about free men, free markets, limited constitutional government is just a bunch of conservative hokum.
Yeah.
And you guys just need to get over it and get on the way to the great Soviet. We're all on the same train together.
Right.
And Mike and I were just talking about earlier, I went to Target this week to get light bulbs. You can't get incandescent bulbs anymore. And so I Googled it, and the federal government banned the production and importation of incandescent bulbs in 2014.
Right.
And if they're going to do this, they're just going to ban the internal combustion engine.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and put this equipment is already in there. These mileage and GPS functions are already in a large number of automobiles to start with. So now they're proposing to tax us by the mile. Now, to tax us by the mile, they, of course, need electronic access to the systems in our vehicles, which have a GPS component, because otherwise, how can you calculate where you went?
Yeah, well,
Right? So, I mean, we're just putting up with this, and the answer has to be no. And this is why my passion for school choice, and why we're going to change one of our subtitles to include the voice of choice in Southern California here. This is why my passion is getting the children away from the government. I think that that's our first step. And it is a revolutionary step, and more than any other single thing, this signals our concern about our liberties, about our rights to teach our own children. And yes, those rights to teach the children make school choices, those belong to the parents of these illegals as well. They can't possibly do a worse job than the government itself.
Right.
Don't you agree?
Yes, and if we don't want our children to be slaves, we just have to realize the Stasi is alive and well in Sacramento.
Yes.
And they have to be crushed. And if we got the call for Trump to send in M1 tanks to surround the state capitol, I'm for that.
Hey, Brent, I like your style.
I do too.
But no, this is the point. But they're threatening us all the time. And the only way to strike back at these people really is to take the money. Because with them, it's all about the money, it's all about the power, and we continue to yield to them. And imagine, up in Sonoma County, they've got an ordinance which says that the county is supposed to hire an actuary and calculate the cost of granting a pension increase before it's granted. Well, we pointed that out time after time, that it was a continuing fiduciary responsibility of the various city councils and boards of supervisors, notwithstanding the statute.
And we didn't know there was a law.
I did not.
Yeah, so this is a state law? The Senate bill? Yeah.
Yeah, it was mandatory.
Well, thank you so much for on this last night of Hanukkah, thank you for illuminating.
Hey, I meant to mention it to all of you, you of Jewish belief, heritage, or persuasion. Happy Hanukkah to all of you out there. And this is a show that is proud of its Judeo-Christian roots, and
we got a little of each in here.
Oh, we do. We got Jews. I got a Bible thumping Baptist over here. Bourbon drinking Baptist, right? and a Catholic at the other microphone here. This is America, and there's a diversity that we're enthusiastic about. It's religious and cultural diversity in the very best sense of the word.
Well, I think the lesson of Hanukkah is a lesson for California, that it is a fight, a battle of the good over the evil, the wicked over the tyrants.
That's right.
We won in ancient times. We're going to win now.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, and we Americans, when we stop to think about it, the people that we call tyrants are still afraid of us. And the reason why I say that is because they still think that they have to steal the vote. They still think that the vote matters. In fact, they know that the vote matters. It matters so much, the consent of the people, that they have to steal votes. If they thought they didn't have to steal votes, if they thought that they could just impose their will, I'm sure that they would.
Yes.
I'm sure that they would. But the fact that they don't, the fact that they hesitate, the fact that they still think that they need to go through the motions means that at some level they are still afraid of the American people. At some level they know that Paris could happen here. Right?
If they have the guts to do it in Paris, we certainly should have.
Yeah, they're a bunch of frogs. Those are the French. We make jokes about them. Well, I'm starting to believe that the joke's on us. We're looking for men and women who can remember that this country went to war over taxes in the very beginning, and these people are certainly making war on us. I mean, they've run up bills that we can't pay.
Yeah.
This $200 or $300 trillion in unfunded liabilities, much of it coming out of Social Security and Medicare, and 2/3 of the immigrants, legal, illegal, or otherwise, are on some form of public welfare, and that's just what we know about. Well, a good part of that ends up being a burden on the Social Security system, so they're a huge part of that. So when you look at it overall, we know that poverty and ignorance breeds crime. Well, what are we bringing across the border other than poverty and ignorance and therefore crime? That's just a fact.
And I think we have to stop calling it tax. It's plunder and theft, and we left the world of taxation, normal, coherent taxation, a long time ago.
Yeah, you're so right on that, Brent, and we have to sharpen our rhetoric. Part of what this movement is about at this point is developing a better rhetoric, developing argumentation, developing approaches. And, one of my main problems that I have is getting even very well-informed, sophisticated people to understand that the government as we know it is nothing more than an ongoing criminal enterprise.
Yeah.
I mean, how else can you explain the fact that they don't obey the law, and then they run up bills that can't be paid, and then the judges sit there, twiddle their thumbs, the county people, the lawyers for the county twiddle their thumbs, the county county supervisors and city councilmen twiddle their thumbs because this problem is so big. And Jonathan was asking me here during the break, how did I think all this was going to go? Well, I have to think that at some point we're going to address this, if only because of Say's law, and I'm certain that you've heard that before. I think it was an economic advisor, I think back in the Nixon or Reagan administration, but his formulation was quite simple. He said, if something can't go on forever, it won't.
Right.
All right? So So these pensions can't be paid, and therefore won't be paid.
Yeah, and our America's founding fathers knew exactly how we have to have a tight rein on our government, because they know how crazy government does become.
That's right. I mean, they've exceeded all bounds, and I've often thought. In fact, I started a round, a new round of political reading, history reading, back in the early '90s, and the question that I asked myself was fairly simple. Considering where we are, or put it another way, where we were in the '90s, would I have been worse off at the time of the revolution? Was it really so bad during the initial days of the American Revolution that I would have revolted with our founding fathers and the colonists? Yeah. Would most of us who call ourselves conservatives, if we looked at that deal, we might say, hey, man, that wasn't such a bad deal. We might not have been motivated, or we might not now be motivated to rebel against that.
Right. What was it, 1 or 2% taxation?
Yes, and of course, the colonists recognized other things. It was the interference with the operation of our laws, the interference with our operation of our courts, a requirement of running around and getting stamps on things, the huge inconvenience of it, and of course the assertion or reassertion of control over the colonies that Britain had made, and of course it ended up injecting us into the war with the French. Interjecting us on the side of the French and the French on our side into the wars between Britain and France, the Napoleonic Wars. What later became the Napoleonic Wars. But in the early days we're fighting those. But in any event, it was a comparatively low level of taxation, and even medieval serfs were limited to 25%, so it was amazing. Hey, Brett, it's been delightful talking with you tonight.
You too.
We enjoy having you as one of our frequent listeners and frequent callers, and I look forward to speaking with you in the future.
Thank you.
On this last day of Hanukkah, have a nice one, and then we will we'll talk with you again soon.
Very good.
All right, take care now.
Bye.
All right, so we now. Do you want to do it?
Yeah, this is a special edition.
This is a special edition.
The Government Grifter.
All right,
hit the music. And now, live from Glendale, California, it's this week's Government Grifter Awards. And this week we have nominees from none other than Sonoma County.
Where else?
Beautiful Sonoma County.
Right.
So we've got. I've got a list of nominees tonight,
all right,
just because I think people enjoy hearing these nominees.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to start with the first nominee, and these are 2016 total pay and benefits.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's 2016, and we get this information from Transparent California.
Yes.
The first nominee is the Senior Geographic Information Technician.
Whoa, say what?
The Senior Geographic Information Technician.
What?
I don't know what that is. Maybe they're just good with Google Maps or something.
All right. Okay.
What
does he make?
$125,000 a year, total pay and benefits.
Oh, my God. They must pay him by the syllable.
Yeah. And then the next nominee is also a question mark. I have no idea what this person does. The Chief Deputy Sealer. Sealer. I guess he seals things up.
Or licks envelopes? What?
Yeah, maybe that's what it is.
Chief Deputy Sealer?
Well, this Chief Deputy Sealer is making $129,000 a year.
All right. Jeff, our technician, just left the room, the control room. He's online.
If anybody out there knows what a Chief
Deputy
Deputy Sealer is, let us, because we are genuinely perplexed.
We got to know.
Okay, our next nominee is the Affordable Housing Assistant Manager.
Assistant manager.
Assistant Manager.
Yeah, right.
$131,000
Whoa!
a year.
Wow.
The next nominee is the Equal Employment Opportunity Manager.
Yeah.
$146,000 a year. And then I've got the Deputy Fair Manager.
Oh no!
$153,000 a year.
Whoa!
And
Whoa.
then, not to be outdone, the Fair Manager.
Oh, the fair manager. They got a deputy and a fair manager.
$185,000
Oh
a year.
man.
Okay.
Oh jeez.
And then our next nominee is appropriate. The Auditor, Controller, Treasurer / Tax Collector.
the guy who's supposed to be controlling
that's
this
right.
this whole mess.
$270,000 a year.
Jeez. Oh man.
And our last nominee is the Retirement Administrator. How appropriate is that?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
The keeper of the
$280,000 a year.
280. All
We
right.
have a special mention nominees, the supervisors, the county supervisors.
The jerks who presided over
All
the whole
make
thing.
$205,000 a year, 201, 195, 176, and 172.
Oh,
So they're
man.
well paid.
Oh, jeez. All right. Drum roll, please. Brrr.
And the winner of this week's Government Grifter Awards is the Chief Deputy Sealer.
Oh, you had to give it to him.
This is
Yeah.
Chief Deputy Sealer's first nomination
Right.
and first Grifter Awards.
That's
Congratulations, Chief Deputy Sealer.
That's right. And if you guys are out there listening to this show, please call in because we want to know what the hell you do for
that
this kind of money.
money.
All right. Hey, we got 2 minutes. Dave from Orange County called in. Dave, I'm going to give you 30 seconds. Fire away before I sign off.
Okay, Mike, I want to wish you what George Bush told his friend. I wish you many days of clear and unlimited visibility. That's a pilot's term.
I know
Okay.
it.
Yes, sir. Okay, here's what I'd like, Mike. What do you think? I'd like to see an investigation into these local city municipalities, their benefits, based on 2006, their strike of the grocery unions. They literally told me, one person, they didn't want to pay anything for their health care. You and I, most of us pay a benefit of a copay, not a copay, but every 2 weeks when we get our paycheck, we see our deduction for our health care. They don't want to pay anything. Those folks didn't want to pay anything. I want an investigation.
Right.
See if that's the case. State
Well, we
and
can't.
local.
Yeah, we can't. Thanks. There's your 30 seconds. I'll reply briefly, and then we'll begin to sign off. We of course cannot investigate private industry unions, but we can and should have a wide-ranging investigation or just basic understanding about what our political costs are in our system. And as we said earlier, anything that can't go on forever simply won't. Well, we're coming up on this is the end of our
It was a
thing.
fun show tonight, Mike.
It was.
Great job.
Hey, well, thank you. It's always great having you, Jonathan, here. December, believe me, the enemy's not resting. You shouldn't either. We hope to have you here every Sunday night, 8 to 9:30 here on Radio Free Los Angeles. Thank you, Brooke, our call screener. Thank you, Jeff, our tech guy. Thank you, Basil Hoffman, who records our intro. And thank you, Jonathan. We'll see everybody here next week. Radio Free Los Angeles, over and out.